Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true terrifying stories about being home alone on Halloween night. So dim your lights, lock your doors, and let's step into the Appalachian dark together. But before we continue, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe, and don't forget to like and share. Thank you all. Now, let's begin. My parents were out of town for Halloween weekend, down in Grafton visiting my aunt. I stayed behind at the house. Our place sits at the edge of a little hollow in Monroe County, tucked between two long pine ridges. Friday night, I carved a pumpkin and popped in some old horror flick I found on VHS in a dusty box downstairs. Around 1 in the morning, I started hearing wind pushing against the aluminum siding. Totally normal stuff. I've lived there most of my life. I know all the usual noises. What wasn't normal was hearing the back shed door click shut. Now, that shed's halfway up the hill and warped to hell. The whole frame is rusted out, and it drags against the ground when you try to move it. You'd have to really yank it closed, and even then, it screeches like nails on a chalkboard. But this time it shut clean, like someone just gently pulled it closed and let the latch catch. I looked out, but the motion light didn't flip on. I turned off the porch light to see better and stared out into the trees for a while. No movement, no sounds besides the wind. I figured maybe a branch fell or a draft slammed it. I wasn't too bothered. Went to bed with Mags curled up by my feet. She's an old mutt, mostly lab with some kind of terrier mixed in, and she's got cataracts now. Doesn't see much beyond shapes, so when she sat straight up around 4 a.m. and growled, I didn't jump right away until I noticed she wasn't looking at the door. She was staring dead at the window, second floor window. I leaned over her and peered through the glass, trying not to breathe. Nothing. No movement. A few seconds later, the porch light popped on by itself, which made no sense. It's set to trigger from 12 feet away. Someone has to walk clear up the steps for it to trip. And I hadn't seen anything move. I tried to lie back down, but sleep just wouldn't come. I laid there stiff as a board until the sun came up. By Saturday afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling. I hiked up to the shed. The door was sealed tight, and nothing looked touched, except for the key hook inside. One of the spare sets was gone. It had been hanging there forever, untouched. House key, garage, the mailbox at the end of the road, even the extra truck key with the little chip in it. All gone. I called my dad. He gave me that typical dad response, said I probably just forgot where I put them. Maybe left them in my jacket or something. But I hadn't touched that hook in years. I knew where they were. They weren't there now. That night, I kept every light in the house on. Mags was pacing more than usual, not resting, ears turning toward the hallway like she was picking up something I couldn't. I camped out on the couch in the living room, half watching TV, dozing off now and then. Then, around 2:40, I heard my truck unlock. Not once, not twice, but over and over. That loud, unmistakable clunk of the locks, maybe 6 or 7 times, back to back, echoing like it was right outside the window. I leapt up and yanked the curtain open. The headlights blinked. No one was in sight. I grabbed the key fob from the hook by the door and hit lock. The truck chirped in response, and then unlocked again. I didn't even touch the button. I locked it a second time. This time it stayed. I unplugged the remote and shoved it in the freezer. Don't ask me why, panic logic, I guess. I just wanted it cold and dead and out of reach. Sleep was off the table. I did laps around the windows, checked every lock twice, watched the woods for any sign of movement. The rest of the night passed without anything else happening, but I didn't close my eyes once. Sunday rolled in, and I kept trying to tell myself I was overreacting. Halloween's weird. This area has all kinds of creepy folklore and stories. Maybe it was just someone screwing around, kids. A neighbor with too much time on their hands. But I couldn't let it go. That itchy, too warm feeling in your neck when you know something's off. I took the shotgun upstairs with me. I'd never actually loaded it before, but I loaded it that night, just in case. It was quiet most of the evening. Nothing but the usual creaks and the sound of Mags's claws ticking across the floor. But then, around 3:15, she started whining. Low and steady, the kind of whine she usually saves for thunderstorms. She backed herself into the space behind the recliner. I reached for the lamp, and just like that, the power died. Not a flicker or a buzz, just gone. like someone hit the main breaker. I grabbed my phone to check for outages, but Wi-Fi was out too. The power company's app wouldn't load. The bars dropped to nothing. That's when I heard it. A heavy thump on the front porch. Just one footstep. No pacing. No shifting. Just a single, solid step. Then silence. I crept toward the stairwell, trying not to make the floor creak. Whoever was out there wasn't just wandering. They knew exactly where to step. There wasn't a second sound. And then I heard the front door unlock, not jiggle. Not rattle. Not someone testing it. Unlock. Smooth. Precise. Like they had the key. I edged to the top of the stairs and peered down. The door was open, just a couple inches, but enough to see pitch black through the crack. No figure. No silhouette. Just absence. My chest tightened so hard I could barely swallow. I couldn't bring myself to take another step. I just stood there waiting for, I don't know what. Then I heard another sound, a click. Not from outside, from the breaker box. It's in the basement. Inside the house. I snapped out of it and bolted downstairs, flipped every switch on the panel. The lights came roaring back, all at once. Mag shot out from under the table, barking like mad and beeline for the kitchen. I followed. The front door was wide open now. I slammed it shut and threw every lock, then dragged the china cabinet in front of it. Dumb move, probably. That thing's mostly glass. But I wasn't thinking strategy. I just needed a barrier, something to hold. Then came the sound. Scratching. Long and slow. From the back window, the one that faces the woods. 3 deliberate scrapes, not like nails. It sounded like metal. I leaned over the sink and caught the tiniest glint of silver just before it vanished. The motion light flicked on a second too late. Nothing was there. Just faint smudges on the glass, 3 marks, side by side, like someone had dragged the key across it. I didn't sleep. I sat at the table with the shotgun across my lap until the sun finally came up. I'm staying at a motel just off Route 17. Cheap place with buzzing lights and thin walls, but I feel safer here. It's been a week. My dad came back, looked around, said nothing was out of place, even showed me the spare keys all back on the hook like they never left. I was 16 when my mom had to leave town on Halloween night. She got a call from my aunt in Kentucky. Usually, if my mom had to go somewhere overnight, our neighbor Cheryl would swing by to check in on me. She lived maybe a quarter mile down the road, close enough to walk if you didn't mind a dark stretch of trees and no sidewalks. But that weekend, she was visiting her sister in Marion with her kids, so it was just me. Mom asked if I'd be okay more than once. You know how parents do that thing where they pretend to ask casually but they're low-key panicking? That. I told her I'd be fine. I was 16. I wasn't scared of staying alone. Besides, it wasn't like anything exciting ever happened in Elk Creek. We lived in a quiet little town tucked into a corner of West Virginia that barely existed on maps. 1 gas station with a flickering sign, 2 churches that still rang actual bells, and no street lights at all once you left the main road. It was the kind of place where houses sit far apart and people wave at each other from their porches without ever really talking. You could go months without seeing your neighbors unless someone's dog got loose. We never got trick-or-treaters out where we lived. Too far between houses, too many unpaved driveways. I'd still carved a few pumpkins earlier in the week, mostly out of habit, and stuck them out on the porch railing. That night, I figured I'd carve 1 more, throw on a hoodie, and spend the evening on the couch with horror movies and leftover candy from school. Low effort, low stress. It was just past 8 when I heard the first knock. 2 light taps on the front door, barely louder than a polite knock. I figured maybe someone got lost and needed directions. Or maybe a really late trick-or-treater? I got up, walked to the front door, and opened it without thinking twice. No one was there. The porch light was already on, buzzing faintly the way it always did. The wind had picked up a little, scattering leaves across the steps and into the yard. I leaned out, looked both directions down the driveway, even stepped outside for a second to check if someone was hiding behind the truck. Nothing. Weird, but not terrifying. I went back inside, locked the door, not because I felt unsafe, just because it was getting chilly, and went to finish carving the pumpkin I'd started earlier. About 20 minutes later, I heard another knock. This time it came from the side door, the one no one uses. It's set into the wall near the laundry room, opens out onto a narrow strip of gravel between our house and a thicket of trees. We've always just kind of ignored it. I don't even think it's been unlocked in years. I didn't open it. I stood in the hallway and stared at the door for a minute, trying to decide whether I should say something. Then came the knock again. 2 short, sharp taps. I called out, "Hello?" No response. I walked over and flicked on the outside light, then peeked through the side window. Still nothing. Now I was starting to feel a little off. I told myself it could have been an animal or even the wind. I tried to shake it off, went back to the living room and put on the thing. I'd barely made it through the opening scene when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message said, "Your pumpkin looks stupid." I sat there staring at it for a second, then laughed. Honestly, I thought it was a joke. Maybe one of the guys from school messing around. I sent back, "Nice. Who is this?" No reply. A few minutes went by. I tried to ignore it, but I was already on edge. Then came the next knock. This time from the back door. That one rattled me. Our back porch is small and kind of hidden, just a wooden platform with 2 steps leading down into the yard. It's usually dark back there because the porch light broke sometime around Easter and no one ever got around to fixing it. I grabbed the flashlight we keep in the kitchen drawer and walked over. There was something on the welcome mat. A little scarecrow doll, handmade looking, with button eyes and a stitched mouth, about the size of a football. Around its neck was a piece of twine, and tied to that was a small tag made from torn paper. My name, Callan, was written on it in all caps. Black marker, clean handwriting. I didn't even stop to think. I locked every door, deadbolts, latches, everything. Shut every blind. Turned off the porch light. I sat back down in the living room, pulled my hoodie up, and just listened. I kept telling myself it was a prank. Someone screwing around. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I had my phone in my hand, debating whether to call my mom. I didn't want to freak her out, but something felt wrong. That's when I noticed something on the floor near the front door. Just barely sticking out from under the frame was a piece of folded brown paper. I picked it up and unfolded it carefully. "I like when you're alone." I'm already inside. I stopped breathing for a second. Everything in me just dropped. I took off through the house, checking every closet, under every bed. I opened the attic hatch and pulled down the ladder even though we never use it. I checked the crawl space under the stairs. Nothing. No broken windows. No signs of a forced door. Nothing. Then it hit me, the router. The one in the kitchen always shows when someone connects to our Wi-Fi. I pulled out my phone and opened the settings. There it was, a device labeled Nokia, connected for over an hour. We don't own anything Nokia. I turned off the Wi-Fi. Seconds later, another message popped up. "Don't turn things off, Callan." The contact name just said local. I shut the phone off completely and went for the landline. We've had it forever, hardly ever used it. I plugged it in and dialed 911. It rang once. Then I heard breathing. Not fast, not panicked, just a slow, steady inhale, and then exhale. I hung up. Right after that, the power went out. Lights, TV, appliances, everything, dead silence. Then, above me, footsteps. Not heavy, not stomping, just this careful, deliberate creaking sound from upstairs. Like someone trying not to be heard but failing anyway. I didn't go up. I opened the basement door, slipped inside, and pulled it shut behind me. Didn't slam it, just let it close enough to click quietly. There's a bolt lock on the inside. I slid it into place. And I waited. For hours, probably. At some point, I lost track of time. I sat there with the flashlight off, breathing through my sleeve, trying not to make a sound. At one point, I swear I heard something dragging across the floor above, like something heavy being pulled slowly across wood. Then, this sounds ridiculous, but I heard what sounded like laughing. Not full-on laughter, more like someone trying to imitate a laugh, like they'd only ever seen it in a movie. I didn't sleep. I waited until the first rays of sunlight filtered through the basement windows. Then I unbolted the door and crept upstairs. Everything looked the same. No broken locks, no open doors, but every pumpkin I'd put out on the porch had been smashed, one by one, crushed flat and scattered across the steps. And when I looked again at the scarecrow doll I'd left on the kitchen table, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There was a flap stitched into its chest. I opened it. Inside was a strip of old Polaroid film. It was my face. Blurry, grainy, but unmistakably me sitting on the couch in my hoodie. The photo had been taken from outside the living room window. I never found out who did it. The cops couldn't find anything. Said maybe it was just a Halloween prank gone too far, but I don't leave the blinds open anymore. Halloween landed on a Tuesday that year. I just settled into this tiny rental cabin tucked way up in the hills outside a place called Dalton Creek, somewhere deep in the Appalachian foothills. The landlord was some guy living in Daytona who hadn't seen the place in years. He left most of the upkeep to a guy named Ray, who came by once a month to check on things and drop off propane tanks for the backup generator. Ray was friendly enough, kind of slow-moving. The sort of guy who always seemed like he was about to tell you something but changed his mind halfway through. That week, Ray texted to say he'd be running late. So I figured Halloween would be just me, my dog Nellie, a couple cans of chili, and whatever DVD I'd borrowed from the library. No trick-or-treaters ever came up the gravel road. I didn't even bother picking up candy. The cabin had exactly one lock on the front door and no back door. Just a warped little porch with an old swing that banged against the siding whenever the wind picked up. No landline. No real cell signal unless I walked up the drive and held my phone in the air like I was trying to catch a butterfly. Internet was spotty at best, and when it rained, everything died. Around 7:30 that night, right as I was heating up dinner, the power cut out completely. Honestly, I wasn't surprised. The generator had been making this weird wheezing noise all day, like it was trying to cough something up. I grabbed my flashlight, called Nellie over, and finished warming the chili on the little camp stove I kept in the kitchen for exactly this reason. The flashlight flickered once but stayed on. So far, so good. After dinner, I curled up on the couch with Nellie stretched out in front of me, her nose tucked under her paws. I queued up a horror movie on my laptop, trying to squeeze it in before the battery died. We got maybe halfway through before Nellie picked up her head and let out this deep, low growl, one of those slow, chesty ones she only does when someone's near the property. Except there shouldn't have been anyone near the property. Nearest neighbor was maybe 4 miles away and the only road in was gravel. I'd have heard it. I paused the movie and listened. Silence. Then, one sharp creak from the porch swing. Not a sway. Just a single, heavy noise, like someone had plopped down suddenly. I walked to the window and angled the flashlight out through the glass. Swing was perfectly still. Not moving at all. I told myself it was probably the wind. Maybe it had shifted something loose. Even though, weirdly, the trees weren't moving either. I turned back toward the couch. Nellie was still locked onto the door, ears flat, body stiff. At that point, I figured I should check the generator. If the battery was dying and the power wasn't coming back, I didn't want to be stuck in total dark all night. I leashed Nellie and stepped outside. The air was colder than I expected. No wind. No bugs. Nothing making any noise at all, really. Just the crunch of the gravel under my boots as we walked the short path to the shed where the generator lived. I popped the latch. My flashlight dimmed, then steadied. Inside, the generator switch was already off, which was weird because I hadn't touched it. I flipped it back on. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. I leaned in to check the fuel line, and that's when Nellie pulled hard toward the house and started growling again. This time louder. Fierce. I turned back toward the porch. The light, dead for weeks, was glowing. Just on. Like someone had flipped the switch. I stood there for a second, unsure whether to go back or just walk into the woods and keep going. But eventually, I walked slowly toward the cabin. Right as I hit the steps, the porch light snapped off again. Inside, I bolted the door and threw the old metal slide bolt I'd screwed into the frame the week before. It wasn't much, but it made me feel better. Nellie paced in a slow circle, then lay under the table, still watching the front door. I told myself it was probably a short. The place was a wiring nightmare. Who knows how things were connected? I settled onto the couch again, propped the flashlight up on the armrest, and opened a book. I hadn't even made it past the first paragraph when something upstairs fell. Not a soft thud. This was a full crash, like a chair tipping over and hitting the floor hard. I froze. Nellie stood again and headed straight for the stairs. I followed, flashlight out in front of me. The spare bedroom door was open. I hadn't been in there all day, and I knew I'd left it closed. Inside, the metal folding chair by the window was knocked over on its side. Everything else looked untouched. I checked the closet. Nothing. Under the bed. Nothing. But when I turned to leave, the flashlight in my hand flickered again and then cut out completely. Dead. I smacked it a few times. Nothing. Nellie made this tiny, worried noise in the back of her throat. I picked her up and walked straight back downstairs. That was the first time I really started to feel like someone else had been in the house before me. I tried my phone, just in case. Completely black. Wouldn't turn on. Plugged it in, still nothing. No power, no connection, no light. At around 10, the noises started again. The porch swing creaked once. Then footsteps. Actual steps, slow and steady, crossing the wood of the porch. Nellie growled again. Same low, warning sound from earlier. I crouched by the window and peeked through the gap between the curtain and the wall. The swing wasn't moving, but the door was open, just slightly, maybe 2 inches. But I had locked it. I had bolted it, and I hadn't heard the bolt slide. Only the latch, like someone had gotten past the bolt. I backed away from the door, hard hammering. Started second-guessing myself. Maybe I hadn't bolted it after all. Maybe I just thought I did. But when I looked down at the floor, the bolt piece was still attached to the frame, only it wasn't attached to the door anymore. It had snapped clean off, like it had been forced. That's when I noticed something else. My flashlight was sitting on the table, still on. Same one that had died in my hand upstairs, still glowing, like it had never gone out. I hadn't brought it down, I was sure of that. I grabbed Nellie and locked us in the bathroom. No windows, solid door, just cracked tiles and an old towel rack, but it felt safer. We stayed there all night, didn't hear anything else. No more footsteps, no voices, no creaks. When the sun finally started coming through the bathroom door crack, I opened it, walked through the house. Everything looked exactly how I'd left it, except the bolt. It was back in place, reattached, like it had never broken. Ray showed up that afternoon, pulling his truck up the drive, sweating through his shirt, hauling 2 big propane tanks in the bed. I told him the power had gone out and something strange had happened. I mentioned someone might have tried to get in. He just nodded, didn't ask any questions. Then he said, without really looking at me, "You ever see lights out here at night?" I told him no. He nodded again. "Good. If you ever do, don't follow them, and don't open the door." Then he got back in the truck and drove off. I packed everything the next morning. Left the deposit, left the dishes in the sink, didn't even bother calling the landlord. I haven't been back, not once. My parents took off early that Halloween morning, something like 6 or 6:30, to go help my Uncle Jimmy patch up the shed behind his place in Mercer County. A big storm was supposed to roll in that evening, and the roof had half caved in from a bad wind a week before. It sounded like a long, miserable day. Cold wind, damp wood, Dad and Jimmy swearing at soggy beams and yelling over the sound of a power drill. I didn't want any part of it, so I faked sick. Told Mom I'd been throwing up since 4 a.m., made a whole show of it. Wrapped myself in a blanket, curled up on the bathroom floor. She didn't really buy it, but she let it slide. I think she knew I just needed a day off. We live out near Larchwood, Southwest Virginia, one of those places that barely shows up on a map. Our house sits at the end of a gravel road, tucked back in the woods, surrounded by nothing but trees and the occasional collapsed barn or hunting stand. The kind of place where you can yell as loud as you want and no one's going to hear you. No cell towers, no neighbors, just hills and silence. Which was perfect, honestly. I thought I'd have the whole house to myself until at least midnight. Dad drives slow, and they were taking the back roads. I had popcorn, root beer, and a stack of DVDs that hadn't seen daylight in years. I even found The Ring buried in the basement cabinet. That one used to scare the hell out of me when I was younger, so I figured why not give it another shot. Something about watching a creepy movie alone on Halloween just felt right. By 7 o'clock, the woods were already black outside the windows. That's one thing about living out here. It gets dark fast, and it stays dark. No porch lights down the road. No glow from the next house over. Just nothing. I flipped off the porch light out of habit. We never leave it on, and no one ever shows up anyway. The wind was picking up a bit, and every now and then I could hear a dull thump from a branch hitting the roof, but the power was still on. I wrapped myself in a blanket and started the movie, just sinking into it. It was right around the scene where the girl comes out of the TV, still creepy by the way, when the screen cut out. Just static, like an old TV with no signal. A second later, every light in the house shut off. Everything. No warning, no flicker, just gone. And no thunder either, no lightning. It was just suddenly quiet and black and still. At first, I just sat there, thought maybe the wind had knocked something loose. Power goes out all the time out here, nothing new. I got up and walked over to the kitchen to grab the flashlight. Reheat one in the drawer next to the sink, just for this kind of thing. As I passed the window, I saw something that stopped me cold. The porch light was on. I froze for a second, just staring. I knew I'd turned it off earlier. I was 100% sure. And the power was out there, shouldn't have been anything on. Not the TV, not the clocks, and definitely not the porch. My first thought was maybe when the power cut, it reset something, tripped a circuit or switched something back on automatically. I walked over to the front door, unlatched it, and cracked it open just enough to see. The wind had picked up outside, leaves whipping across the porch. The trees beyond the yard were groaning like they were about to split in half. But there wasn't anyone out there. No footsteps, no sound, no movement. Just that strange humming silence in the light. I shut the door and turned back, and that's when the flashlight in my hand started flickering. Not slowly fading like the battery was dying, but short, jerky blinks, like something was interfering with it. I gave it a smack. It steadied. I took 2 steps toward the hallway, and it blinked out completely. Then I realized how quiet it had gotten. Like, truly silent. No fridge hum, no wind noise. Not even the little ticks and creaks the house makes when it settles. It felt like being underwater. That same thick, muffled pressure in the ears. I backed into the kitchen and sat at the table, holding the flashlight like it was going to do something for me. I figured if I just stayed put, waited it out, I'd be fine. My parents were due back eventually. I could just sit still until then. And then the flashlight turned itself back on. I wasn't touching it. It lit up on the floor, beam pointed straight down the hallway toward the back bedrooms. The guest room, the storage closet, and the bathroom. Then, it shut off again. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe, I don't think. It was like my brain had hit pause. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It lit up the counter like a camera flash in the dark. I lunged for it. Mom's name on the screen. I picked up. Hello? Nothing. Mom? Still nothing. But I could hear something. This faint hissing sound, almost like a bad connection. And underneath it, barely there breathing. Slow. Steady. Then it clicked. Call ended. I stared at the screen. Hit redial. No signal. I put the phone down and took a deep breath. Tried to tell myself it was just a dropped call. Weird timing. That's all. I walked to the pantry to get the emergency candles. Opened the door. Stopped. There was a shoe sitting on the floor. An old, muddy boot, half decayed, like it had been out in the woods for years. Definitely not one of ours. It looked soaked through and smelled like wet leaves and mold. And next to it, pine needles. Fresh. Still green. But they weren't tracked in, they were laid out in a little trail, like someone had placed them there one by one. I backed out and turned toward the living room. Almost tripped over the second boot. Same style, same rot. But this one had something in it. A bone. Small. Delicate. Too small to be from a deer or raccoon. Looked like it could have come from a human hand. I dropped the flashlight, grabbed my phone, ran for the front door. It wouldn't open. The deadbolt spun like it wasn't attached to anything. I tried the knob, kicked it, slammed my shoulder into it. Nothing. It was like the house had locked itself from the inside. I ran to the kitchen door. Same thing. Checked every window sealed shut. Not nailed, not painted, just stuck. Like they were never meant to open. I tried calling again. Still nothing. No bars, no Wi-Fi. Just me in the dark. The flashlight turned back on. Still on the floor. Still aimed at the hallway. This time, it caught something new. Footprints. Bare. Wet. Wet. leading from the middle of the hallway toward the bathroom. I followed them. I don't know why I did. Curiosity maybe. Stubbornness. Or just not wanting to feel like prey. I moved slow, step by step, trying not to breathe too loud. The bathroom door was open. The mirror was fogged. There was no water running, no hot air. But the mirror was dripping like someone had just stepped out of a long, steaming shower. In the fog, written with a finger, was one sentence: "Not alone." That was it. That was the moment where everything in me said, leave. I ran back to the living room. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mom's number. "We're outside," all lowercase, no punctuation. That wasn't how she wrote texts. Then another, "Come to the porch." I looked out the window. No car. No headlights. No one standing outside. And then behind me, the floor creaked. I turned. My bedroom door was slowly swinging shut. I hadn't opened it all night. I started toward it, slow, every muscle tensed. Reached out, touched the doorknob. My phone buzzed. Another text. Different number this time. Open it. That was it. I bolted into the kitchen, grabbed the keys off the hook. The front and back doors were still stuck, but I remembered the basement. Old house, built on coal. There was a chute hatch under the back deck, used to be for deliveries. I flung open the basement door and ran down into the dark. The smell hit me first: wet earth, rotted wood, rust. I crawled through the shadows toward the hatch. It was stuck. I threw my whole body into it. Once, twice. It pumped. Cold air blasted in. I climbed out into the leaves and ran. Didn't stop until I reached the old gravel road at the bottom of the hill. No lights, just stars and wind and my own heartbeat. I waited there until I saw my dad's truck headlights. From that night, I never stayed alone in that house. My cousin Rhea was getting married in Fairvale, and my parents asked if I could stay at Grandma Noreen's place while the whole family went out there for the week. Grandma had flown out the weekend before to help Rhea get everything ready. I was the only one not going to the wedding. Work deadlines mostly. I do graphic design freelance, so I figured it wouldn't be the worst thing to get some quiet time to myself. Plus, someone had to feed the chickens, keep the house from getting musty, and make sure Grandma's cat, Lemon, didn't climb the curtains out of boredom. So, I drove up on a Tuesday. I remember because it was drizzling, just lightly enough to make the windshield wipers squeak. The gravel road leading to the house was full of slick leaves and muddy ruts. I had to park a little farther down the hill and carry my bags the last few yards. The house looked the same as it always did. 2 bedrooms, faded green shutters, wraparound porch with rocking chairs that creak even when no one's in them. The wind was always moving through the trees up there, so the silence was never total, but it was the kind of place that feels empty in a very specific way. Like it's waiting for something. The first night was fine. I made some pasta, watched one of Grandma's old DVDs on her tiny living room TV, Practical Magic, I think, and went to bed early. It was quiet, peaceful even. Cold enough to use the wood-burning stove, which made the place smell like damp ash and cinnamon from whatever potpourri sachets she kept near the firewood. Wednesday morning, I went out to feed the chickens and open the coop door. Normally, they hear the latch click and start barreling out before I even swing it open, but this time, they just stood there. All 8 of them, frozen in place like they were glued to the ground. One of them let out a slow, grumbly cluck that I'd never heard before, kind of low, almost like a growl. Not loud, but it made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I waved my hand a little and said something like, "Come on, ladies," trying to nudge them out, but they didn't move. Eventually, they shuffled out one by one, slow and weirdly hesitant, like they didn't trust the daylight. I laughed it off and figured maybe there'd been a fox sniffing around the night before. Nothing major. That night, I was sitting on the couch around 11, flipping through Grandma's ancient cable channels. She still had one of those remotes with yellowed rubber buttons when I heard a sound on the porch. Just one knock. Not frantic or heavy. Just a single hollow thunk against the steps. I muted the TV and sat up. Nothing else followed. I went to the front window, peeked out. Porch light was on. No movement. I opened the door a crack and looked around, expecting to see a raccoon or maybe a deer. But the yard was empty. Windy, sure, and full of rustling leaves, but nothing else. I stood there for maybe 20 seconds before locking the door again. Thursday was when the tension started creeping in for real. Around 10 that morning, I stepped out to sweep the porch and noticed the bedroom window on the far side of the house. Grandma's room was wide open. The screen was pushed up too, like someone had slid it open from inside. That room had been shut the whole time. I hadn't even been in there yet. And I know for a fact it wasn't open when I got there. I closed it, latched it, and went back inside. Locked it from the inside too, just in case. That evening, I wedged one of the kitchen chairs under the doorknob, even though I knew how ridiculous that looked. Something about it just felt off. Friday morning, I was wiping down the kitchen windows when I saw them. 5 little handprints, right there on the outside glass. Smaller than a child's. Neat, almost too neat, like someone had deliberately arranged them in a curve, 4 fingers and a thumb pressed flat. There was no dirt trail, no mud smudged below, just these eerily clean prints in a place that made no sense. That side of the house is built on a rise. The window sits 4 feet off the ground. You'd have to be on a stepladder to even reach it, and there was nothing out there. No footprints, no overturned bucket, nothing. I stood there with the sponge in my hand for what felt like forever. Then I wiped them away. Not because I wanted to erase them exactly, but because it felt wrong to leave them there. Like if I kept staring, something would stare back. That afternoon, I didn't leave the house. I kept the curtains shut. Tried to call my brother, but the FaceTime kept cutting out after a minute or two. The Wi-Fi up there is barely usable, and the cell signal is worse. He told me I was just letting myself get freaked out. It's just isolation brain, he said. Keep a flashlight and a bat nearby, you'll be fine. But that night was Halloween. I woke up just after midnight. No reason, just popped awake. The air felt wrong, stale and heavy. There was no wind, not even the usual hum of the fridge or heater kicking on. And then 2 knocks, under the house. Like someone was knocking up from beneath the floor. I didn't move. I lay there with my eyes open, heart pounding. My ears felt like they were ringing from the silence. The knocks weren't loud, just very specific. 1, 2, and then nothing. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I stayed under the covers, eyes darting toward the bedroom door every time the house creaked. Saturday morning, I went out to check the coop again, half dreading what I'd find. One of the hens was dead. No blood, no feathers scattered. Just stopped, lying on its side like someone had flicked a switch and turned it off. I buried it near the old fence post behind the house. The cat followed me out there, but she wouldn't go near the spot. Just sat at the edge of the porch, tail twitching. That evening, things got worse. Around 8 or so, I was sitting at the table trying to distract myself with some work when the hallway lights started flickering. I got up to check the bulb, figured it was just loose. But when I touched it, it was firmly in place, still flickering. I turned around to head back to the couch, and Lemon the cat was in the hallway, sitting perfectly still, ears flattened, eyes locked on the front door. I walked slowly to the peephole and looked through it. There was someone standing at the far end of the porch. They weren't facing the house. They were looking out into the woods, just standing there under the porch light, head tilted like they were listening to something only they could hear. I didn't open the door. I didn't even breathe. I backed away slowly, flicked off the hallway light, and crouched in the corner, heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. 10 minutes passed, then 20. When I finally checked again, the porch was empty. I didn't sleep that night either. By the time the sun came up on Sunday, I'd already packed. But before I left, I noticed something strange. The kitchen table had moved. Just a few inches, but enough that I noticed the rug wasn't aligned anymore. And the salt shaker was lying on its side in the middle of the floor. I walked through the house once more, and that's when I realized I couldn't find the cat. Checked every room, opened every closet, called her name until my voice cracked. No sign. I opened the front door, called again. Nothing. I walked out back, past the coop. She was sitting on top of the hutch, staring into the woods like she was waiting for something. Her fur bristled when I picked her up. She didn't hiss, didn't move. Just let me carry her inside like she was somewhere else entirely. I grabbed my bags and left by 3. I was 28 when I house sat for my cousin Morgan out in Lanes Grove, this quiet stretch of hills in West Virginia that barely qualifies as a town. She and her kids were heading to some Halloween weekend thing. 2 counties over, hay rides, candy apples, all that, and they'd be gone Friday through Sunday. They asked if I could keep an eye on the place while they were away, water the plants, make sure the dogs didn't knock over the trash bins, nothing major. Before they left, Morgan gave me the usual rundown: trash goes out Monday. The old faucet in the upstairs bathroom drips unless you crank it hard. Don't feed the dogs any leftovers. Then she mentioned something I thought was a joke at first. Sometimes people show up out here. Don't answer the door. I looked at her. Like, delivery people? No, she said, brushing her hair into a ponytail. Strangers. Mostly people looking for old graves or trails that don't exist anymore. Or they think there's some kind of historical site back in the woods. There's not. She paused, then added, if anyone knocks, just ignore it. Nobody out here needs anything real. They left around 8 that morning. Friday was quiet. I spent most of it reading and making a slow attempt at organizing my inbox. Made a frozen pizza, fell asleep halfway through some show I'd already seen. Saturday was different. I woke up around 8 again. Nothing weird at first, just the usual chill from the old windows. But when I checked my phone, there were 4 voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize. No names attached. They were short, like 10 seconds, maybe less, and all of them were just silence. Except the last one. That one had this low scraping sound, like something heavy dragging across a hardwood floor. It wasn't loud, but it was too clear to be static. I didn't listen to them again, just blocked the numbers and deleted the messages. Figured it was spam, or some weird robocall glitch. Then, a few hours later, I found the back door open. It was the narrow one off the laundry room, the one that always stuck if you didn't shove it. It was open about 3 inches. Not wide, just enough to see the dead leaves blowing in. I stood there for a second, staring at it. I remembered locking that door. I even remembered how loud it was when the bolt slid in. But now the bolt was hanging loose, like someone had turned it from the inside. I checked the house top to bottom, slowly, room by room. Even the attic, which I hated because it smelled like mice and dust and took forever to pull the ladder down. But there was nothing. No sign anyone had come in. No broken windows. No muddy tracks inside. I locked everything up again, this time checking each door twice. But then little things started to catch my attention. There was a carving knife in the drying rack that I hadn't touched. I hadn't even cooked anything that needed a knife. And the handle was wet, like someone had just rinsed it. There were a pair of tall rubber boots in the mudroom, covered in dried mud. They weren't mine. I don't even think they were Carl's. They looked too wide, too worn, like they'd been sitting in a barn for years. And one of the 2 rocking chairs on the front porch, the one Morgan always sat in, had been turned to face the house. It had always faced outward, toward the trees, toward the open space. Now it was angled in, facing the living room windows, like someone had sat there and watched. I told myself maybe Carl had been up earlier in the week and forgot to move it back. Maybe the boots were his. Maybe I just hadn't noticed the knife until now. I was trying really hard to make it normal. Around 8, I passed the hallway mirror near the guest room and stopped. It looked lower. It had always been just high enough that I could only see the top of my head unless I leaned in. But now it was tilted downward, like someone had adjusted it to hit chest level. I stared at my reflection for a long time. Something about it didn't look quite right, not scary, just off. Like the mirror was holding its breath. I turned every light in the house on, left the TV running for background noise. I even left a couple cabinets open so I could tell if anything moved. At 10:40 on the dot, the landline rang. No one used it. They kept it because cell reception was barely there most days. It rang twice before I picked up. "Is this Delwyn?" the voice asked. It was a man's voice. Way too cheerful, like someone trying out a fake smile over the phone. There was something almost rehearsed about it, like he practiced the line. I didn't answer. He kept going. "You there? Hey, if this is Delwyn, I just want to say, this is a real nice house." "Real warm," I said. "Who is this?" He let out this clipped little laugh, like a slip. One breath. Then he said, "It's Halloween. Thought I'd call in. Make sure you weren't too lonely out there." I hung up and unplugged the phone completely. About 2 minutes later, Morgan's iPad lit up on the kitchen counter. FaceTime request. No caller name, just said unknown. I didn't touch it. Just stared while it rang. Third ring in, the name changed. It now read, guest room mirror. I turned it off and shoved it into the back of the junk drawer. I couldn't stay in the house anymore. Threw on my coat, grabbed the keys, and headed for the car. When I stepped out onto the porch, I stopped. There were muddy footprints, fresh ones, leading from the top step to the door I'd just come out of. They weren't mine. I hadn't worn boots, and these were bigger. I didn't waste time. I ran for the car, already unlocking it. Got in, slammed the door, started it without looking back. But right as I pulled onto the gravel path, I saw it, just for a second. The porch light flickered, then went out. I didn't go home. I drove to a diner 20 minutes away and sat in a back booth until sunrise. Ordered toast and eggs, didn't touch them. Morgan came back around noon. I told her I needed her to come inside with me. The hallway mirror was gone. No mark, no nail, just clean wall like it had never been there. The iPad was back on the charger, completely wiped. No missed calls, no recent apps, no call logs. Nothing. That was a year ago. I still have no idea who called or how they knew my name. My brother Ellis had just moved to Knoxville for a new job. Some data entry gig downtown he wasn't thrilled about, but it paid better than what he was doing. And my parents were up in Kentucky staying with my uncle while he recovered from a back surgery. Ellis, being the older and dramatically cautious sibling, gave me one of his serious older brother warnings before he left. He said Halloween had changed in the area, that it wasn't about candy and costumes anymore. Kids don't trick or treat, he told me. They dare each other to go missing. I laughed, told him he sounded like an amateur campfire storyteller. He rolled his eyes and said, "Just don't be stupid and stay alone, okay?" I liked the quiet. I'd been working doubles all week and was looking forward to not having anyone around. I had horror movies queued up and a big bowl of candy that, realistically, no one would come for. The last time we had trick-or-treaters, we still had a working landline. That Friday night was uneventful in the most peaceful way. I watched 2 movies, turned off the lights around midnight, and went to bed with the house so still I could hear the fridge compressor kick on like a thunderclap. The next morning, things were normal mostly. I was making toast and coffee when I noticed the tin was gone. It was this ugly old metal coffee can my dad used to keep change in quarters, nickels, the occasional crumpled bill. Always sat next to the toaster. We never used it for anything, but it had been there forever, and now it wasn't. I checked the counters, looked in the pantry, even opened the junk drawer that jammed every time you pulled it too far. Nothing. I wasn't panicked or anything. I figured maybe Ellis grabbed it when he left and forgot to say something. He always had tunnel vision when he was packing for trips. Didn't exactly have the highest attention to detail. Still, I made a mental note. Something about it felt slightly off. Not wrong, exactly, just not right either. That evening, I got a text from May, who lived about 15 minutes away down one of the next hollows over. She and a couple friends were drinking in the back of her boyfriend's truck, parked out behind his parents' barn. They were all half buzzed and daring each other to wear stupid Halloween costumes in public. She told me to come over, said I had no excuse not to since I was all alone being creepy and weird. I thought about it, but the road between our places, especially after that sharp turn where the guardrail had rusted away, wasn't something I loved driving after dark. So I passed. She sent one more message, "Suit yourself, Jack-o'-hermit." I stayed up till around 2 watching dumb old Halloween specials. At one point, around 1:30, I thought I heard something near the back wall of the house. This light tapping sound like fingers drumming or maybe a stick hitting the siding. I paused the video, waited. Nothing. Looked out the kitchen window and saw only trees. No wind, no animals I could hear. The kind of silence where you almost start to hear your own blood. Still, nothing felt urgent. I told myself it was a branch or maybe a raccoon and went to bed. The next morning I noticed the side door, the one off the laundry room that we never ever used, was sitting just barely open, not swung wide. Just unlatched and nudged inward like someone didn't want to make a sound. That stopped me. I checked the frame, no scratches, nothing broken, no dirt or leaves on the floor to suggest someone had come in. I called Ellis. He told me flat out to call the sheriff. But I didn't. Not because I was brave or anything. I just didn't want to deal with making it official if it turned out to be nothing. I checked every room, every closet. Nothing seemed out of place. Still, I locked everything. Doors, windows, even the cellar doors out back that hadn't been opened since late summer. That night was Halloween. I kept the porch light off and the curtains shut. Was halfway through Werewolf Flick when I heard it. A voice. Not clear, not loud. Just this low, muffled hum like someone whispering into a phone and pressing it against a pillow. I muted the TV. Nothing. Then, a second later, there it was again. I stood up and moved slowly through the house, pausing in every room. The living room was quiet. So was the kitchen. The front door still locked. Nothing from upstairs. But when I passed the hall closet near the laundry room, the one right next to that unused door, I heard it again. This time closer, softer. Not words, just presence. I opened the closet. It was empty, but the towels were wrong. My mom folds them like she's running a Hotel Perfect 3 stacked tight. These were all out of order, jammed in, hanging halfway out, some of them even flipped backwards. At the bottom, behind a stack of beach towels, was a plastic crate we used for storing winter boots. It had been turned around, like someone had moved it and shoved it back carelessly. That bin hadn't been touched in months. I pulled everything out, one boot at a time, until the bin was empty. That's when I saw it. There, smudged on the inside of the bin in some kind of black soot or maybe marker, was a word. Just one, Balau, written in jagged, uneven strokes. Looked like someone wrote it with their fingertip. I dropped the bin, backed up. The house stayed silent. I grabbed my flashlight, keys, and phone. I wasn't planning to sleep. Just needed air, distance. Maybe I'd crash in the car and figure things out in the morning. But as I passed the basement door, the one we've kept padlocked since August, I stopped. The lock was gone, not broken. Just gone. Like someone had quietly slipped it off and placed it somewhere I hadn't found yet. I listened. Nothing. I opened the door. Cold air drifted up. Not the kind of cold that comes from stone or earth, but the kind that feels, exhaled, like something had been waiting in the dark and just let go of a breath. I clicked on the flashlight and started down the stairs. The basement was as unfinished as always. Dirt floor, wooden beams, sagging shelves stacked with old tools and broken furniture. But right at the base of the steps, I saw them, footprints. Bare, adult-sized. Damp like someone had just come in from a rainstorm that wasn't happening. They led away from the stairs, past the fuse box, and into the back corner behind the storage shelves. I followed. There was a crumpled blue tarp pushed up against the wall like someone had thrown it in a hurry. Behind it, one of the wooden panels looked pried loose, just a hair, just enough to catch the flashlight beam and show the gap. I leaned in. It was dark behind the panel, not the ordinary kind of dark.